So, now after the lunch, we are going on further with the program of this fourth day of the conference of Criminalise Nuclear War Systems. Here in Latvia, Jūrmala, on the very coast of the most radioactive sea in the world, the Baltic Sea. So, during the rest of the day, we will go through Perdana Peace Foundation and Criminalise War Foundation's achievements of their conferences on the subject, as well as other eminent tries to criminalize nuclear weapons. I will show you what there is to be found on the wide web of networks. And we will further elaborate on how to criminalize systems of nuclear war without criminalizing people within those systems, so that we can achieve the goal of divine common law without suffering. So here you could zoom in this webpage of Perdana Peace Foundation. And at the same time, actually, while you're at it, so I don't forget it, this Criminalise War, yeah? These will be two web pages worth visiting that I'll talk about right now. And here is the important message from Perdana Peace Foundation was their conference on New World Order. They had a full conference on New World Order. In Malaysia was this conference, and while you at zooming it, you could zoom in this part of it, and I will go on further with the link there, which says that Professor Johan Galton had a presentation where he described the problem with the United States that has started 250 wars since 1805, has killed 50 state leaders. So he compared really that the United States is much worse than the Roman Empire has been before, what the history can tell us of remains. And he was talking about neo-slavery and neo-colonialism created by global anti-slavery and anti-colonialism institutions. So the institutions that are talking one thing are creating totally opposite reality. And he was talking about Afghanistan, where locals want permanent coalition government, very federal constitution, much like Switzerland, with powerful local democracies. And he was praising much more local people, indigenous people, like we are trying to discuss here. And
Thank you so much indeed. I want to start with my Salam Alaikum. and I want to express my deep gratitude to two doctors. Two doctors, Dr. M and Dr. Ditta. Dr. M is also known as Mahathir Mohamad, but to us who lived for some time in Malaysia, it is Dr. M. I want to express my gratitude for the enormous challenge of giving me the task as a social scientist, as a peace scientist, to explore criminalizing war and energizing peace. So the two books were produced, they were printed in time. There's actually a third book, which is finished, called The Art of Peace, and it will come in print in due time. But my task right now is to go ahead and say something about the content. If you have a look at the book, but it may be a little bit difficult, the subtitle of the book is Criminalizing War, Removing War Causes, Removing War as an Institution. I don't think criminalizing war is enough. There has to be a very positive message. You could call it building peace, but since the focus was on war to start with, removing war causes. And war cause number one, from my point of view, if you look at the table of contents of the book, which will be on the screen, and some of you were handed it out. If you look at it, there are 30 factors I'm building on. It's not a question of one single factor. And when it comes to New World Order, there will never be such a thing. As long as you have human beings around, there will not be order. If you want to look for order, go to the moon. That's fairly orderly. There will be something new, there will be something world, but not order. There will be contradiction, forces, counterforces, dynamism all the time. Nevertheless, I'm talking about removing war as an institution as one basic point. We have been able to remove slavery as an institution and colonialism as an institution. We know perfectly well that there is neo-slavery and neo-colonialism, but that's against the law. It is not an institution. It's not institutionalized. It's not legalized. There is nobody talking about necessary slavery and necessary colonialism as somebody dares talk about necessary war. It was so wonderful with the chorus that was up here, or in the other room. War is a crime. But it's not enough to say that it is a crime. That means it's breaking an important norm. It's also very important to point out alternatives. So let me jump straight into Afghanistan. Straight into it. I'm a mediator, fairly professional. I'm sitting talking with a general from Pentagon, with people high up in the State Department, with Taliban, I do it in Afghanistan, with Al-Qaeda people. I'm talking with that kind of people. They're sometimes called extremists. Some of them are more extreme than others. But that's not what I am looking for. I'm looking for something very different. I'm asking all four of them, there were more, but they're mentioning four groups, what is the Afghanistan you would like to live in? You would like to see? And now I could give you a long, long, fascinating story about dialogues. They are very time-consuming. Some of you might be thinking, what are they talking? My Lord, are they talking? The problem is not whether they're talking, the problem is sometimes to stop them from talking. They talk endlessly. Are they speaking the truth? Who knows what the truth is? Who has a monopoly of that one? Maybe they're speaking their truth. And maybe the task of the mediator is to come up with a way of combining various truths. But let me make a jump and just simply give to you in 1 minute what I think Afghanistan could look like. Point one, a permanent coalition government. There are strong forces, It's not a question of winning elections. It's a question of cooperating. Point two, a very federal constitution giving due attention to the 8 nations and the 25,000 villages. And that makes you ask immediately, what does Afghanistan remind you of? Does not remind me of Norway. Does not remind me of the United States. Both countries are killing in Afghanistan. One somewhat more than the other. It reminds me of Switzerland. Switzerland withdrew its participation. It said, this is not peacekeeping. It withdrew it. Now, if it reminds you of Switzerland, maybe you would go in for local democracy based on 25,000 units. In other words, the Loya Jirga. Maybe you would go in for a federation based on 8 nations. In the Swiss case, there are 2,304. Here, 25,000, and as I mentioned, 8. Maybe you would add to that a Central Asian community with open borders. And of course, above all, open border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The Judan line is at the root of the whole thing. And to not even know about the Judan line is a crime in itself. There is a crime called ignorance too. That line has to go. There is no such thing as Pashtuns seeking safe havens in Pakistan. It's their territory, that's where they lived for thousands of years. Open it. Open the border to all the 8 surrounding entities, countries, including Azad Kashmir, and you would have a beautiful Central Asian community with fantastic possibilities of blossoming. And as the Foreign Minister explained to us at the luncheon talk, giving a basic priority to the basic needs of people. I was so happy when he mentioned the word equity, which is a very important key to peace. You add to that, of course, very important, some measure of peacekeeping. The Afghan culture is extremely violent, and that goes for type 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of Afghans. Extremely violent. But I think they prefer peacekeeping from their brothers and sisters. And I think when it comes to their basic mistake, a terrible treatment of women, I think they prefer to be told that by more advanced Muslim countries, like, for instance, Tunisia, Turkey, Indonesia, also for that matter in Mindanao, and not to be told that by Western feminists. So, you have a 5-point plan there. Who would promote that 5-point plan? Washington, if it were in a good mood, if it were interested in peace. I had a talk with US Congress representatives. Quite extensive talk about this. And I said, Professor Galtung, that sounds like a very interesting project, but the people who elect us are not interested in solving anything. They're interested in this. We for victory. And then we will tell them what the solution is. Well, you can then argue, if you are a congressperson, maybe you are a leader, maybe you can inform those who elected you. But I'll tell you which countries are interested. Turkey, Iran, Russia, China. That's where the ball is. The ball is in the future. And here I have a little addition to what the Foreign Minister told us at lunch. It's not only a question of moderation, it's a question of creativity. Be creative, construct a package. Well, you'll find in that book, Abolishing War, 30 ideas. There is no single one that I go in for, but I mention Afghanistan, and I will mention Israel-Palestine, because it is on everybody's mind. I've only been 40 times to the Middle East. It's a crime not to live there. But I can tell you, maybe it's a crime also to live there. And maybe you see it better if you come back and leave it and come back and leave it. Maybe you do. I know many people who have lived their whole lives in countries and don't have the slightest idea how to solve problems. If I, for instance, should say one thing about Malaysia, the most peaceful group I know in Malaysia are the Orang Asli. If you want to learn about peace for Malaysia, consult the Orang Asli. The most interesting people in the United States that I know of are the Hawaiians. The Ho'oponopono institution is light years ahead of what we in the West have been able to invent. But back to Israel, Palestine, I believe in 12620. Recognize Palestine. Israel could simply recognize it. Sweden did. 3 parliaments in the West are now considering it. The European Parliament is moving in that direction. Recognize it. The majority in the world have recognized Palestine a long time ago. A 2-state solution means a border. Yes, it is 1967, as pointed out in the Riyadh 2002 declaration. Of course it is that. But I would like to add to it the point. There are sacred points on the West Bank for Judaism, and there are sacred points in Israel where Palestinians have lived for oceans of time. Have cantons in both of them. You could have some Israeli cantons on the West Bank and some Palestinian cantons, particularly in northwest Israel, where 780,000 were driven out under the Nakba. 6. A 6-state Middle East community. Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, recognize Palestine, Egypt, and Israel. Open borders. A fantastic area. Accessible. Wonderful. And where is the model? European Community, 1st of January 1958. 6 countries. Germany, Benelux, Italy, France, arrogant France, and Egypt is about as arrogant as France is. About the same. Now, this could simply work. 20. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, in which I played a little role when we came to the beginning of it, has 53 members, 55, if you count 2 non-Europeans, called the United States and Canada, but they seem to think they have a right to be co-inhabitants of all continents, which is an interesting idea. Maybe somebody should be co-inhabitant of North America too. Now, having said that, we have a model. It's not perfect. The European Union is today far from perfect. But it solved a very basic problem. 800 years of warfare, for instance. Okay, 1, 2, 6, 20, and you have something. I've been arguing that in I don't know how many Arab countries. I have been standing up in Arab countries for Israel's right to exist. But an Israel between the Mediterranean and the 1967 4-June border, with some swaps, and I indicated some. Who could promote that in Israel? The peace movement had just had more or less left for the United States of America. Who could promote it? 50% of Israel, they're called women. If you know your Zionism, you know that the religious part of it is Orthodox Judaism. You know how Orthodox Judaism treats women. You know also that the definition of a Jew is to be born by a Jewish woman. Think of that contradiction living inside every Israeli woman. I have met oceans of them. They said this is the basic point. Well, we'll see. Israel is today a liability for the US. US is right now in deflation. I think it's almost impossible to imagine that inflation won't come. And I don't think Israel can escape the South African scenario of coming down as a liability. What I'm now trying to focus on is the following. solve conflicts. See it as a challenge. Talk with all the parties. You sit down with state terrorists one day and terrorists the other day. You might find them unappetizing, but it is totally, absolutely irrelevant whether you find them appetizing or not. The only thing that matters is that you let their subjectivities come into you. You have empathy enough to try to understand how does it feel to be that person. I won't say in that person's shoes, because many people in the world don't have shoes. In other words, maybe if you were one of those, how would you have felt? And I can share with you, after 60 years of experience with this, in about 200 conflicts, I haven't found one party in the world that doesn't have at least one reasonable point. Then you pick up that point and you build on it. If you try to get rid of that party by calling it terrorist, you have already issued a declaration. I hereby declare, but by using the word terrorist, I have stopped thinking. I have abandoned my ability to think. Same goes for state terrorist. But you cannot use one of them without the other. When the other one kills 99-1 relative to terrorism. I define by terrorism killing the defenseless. The defenseless. Now, having said that, I come back to criminalization. There are 2 points made in the book that I would like to emphasize. It's point number 11 and 12. Well, it is simply get away from the anonymity of war. Publish the names of the killers. As John Pilger said not so long time ago, when somebody lifts a gun and kills somebody, or somebody pushes a button and eliminates a wedding party because there is one, quote, terrorist, unquote, suspected to be there, get a name. Get the name of the person, publish it. John Smith, at 12 noon, such and such a day, killed the following persons. That's why they often wear masks, because they know this. The person who goes to his office in Omaha, Nebraska, and sits at his desk with a computer for sending his drones, publish the name. Maybe he's not quite interested in enlisting his name. Maybe somebody could do it. Publish the names of the victims. Learn from United States. Every 9/11, they published the names of the 3,000 with wonderful smiling faces, and you see what a crime it was, that terrible, terrible act. 9/11. What a crime it was. Despicable crime. We are not going into causes and excuses. We are just saying it was a crime. Plainly speaking, war is a crime. We are not arguing whether you do it by war, guerrilla, state terrorism and terrorism. It's the use of violence for political ends. Let us get the names of the killers so that they know they will have to be personally responsible for it. They may have to stand up one day. Let's get the names of those who were killed so that they know exactly the same. There are lots of people out there who care in solidarity with us. Now, United States of America has intervened militarily in about 245 times since 1805, since the beginning by Thomas Jefferson in what today is called Libya. Now that's a little bit much. They passed the Roman Empire in the beginning of the 1990s, and to pass the Roman Empire was nothing easy. I would be inclined to use the word extremism for that country. 50 cases of trying to get rid of, quite often by murder, a president, the head of a state or head of a government they didn't like. You have a look at those interventions. It is so blatantly clear whose interests they are to protect. I have actually made a list of non-interventions, quite interesting one, of dictatorships who were permitted to continue unabated. So, obviously, when we are talking about criminalizing war, we are today to a large extent talking about the United States and Israel. And they share three characteristics, well, all three of them important. The idea of being chosen by God, His chosen people with a promised land. That they were a people without a land, and there was a land without people. Oh, that's a quite heavy thing. If you have that idea, you very easily come to the idea of recreating the glory that once was by punishing those who traumatized you. Chosen as glory trauma, I call it a CGT trauma. It's a psychopathology. If you have a person who claims this, we will hospitalize the person immediately. If you have a president or a prime minister who claims it, it's called patriotism. That has to be critiqued to the bottom. It has to be. Eliminate these factors of a divine origin. Frankly speaking, I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Muslim, I'm more into Buddhism. But when George Bush Jr. said that he had been told by God to promote democracy in the Middle East, I listened to the tape recording. Then I had a strong feeling of blasphemy. To believe that God, out of all people in the world, would choose George Bush Jr. seems to me to go quite far, honestly. Of course, it's not for me to criticize God's taste. I could say none of my business, but I would say blasphemy. Now, get rid of the divine character of the war, the sacred nature of it. Get rid of the anonymity. Go in for the positive aspects. Be better at solving conflict, be better at conciliating trauma. Fight war as an institution. Humanity did it with slavery and colonialism. Not too badly. We made progress. I take note of the fact that up front in that struggle were very often women, middle class, softly religious, many of them English, like the kind of ladies who were camping outside Graham Commons, where the nuclear missiles of England were stationed. In other words, some have been more active in this struggle than others. It's a question of joining that struggle. And I repeat now to end what I have to say. You do it by pointing out that war is a crime. But if you want to punish the criminals, you may risk that they continue the war as long as possible in order not to be taken. You may risk that. You may actually stimulate war by doing it. Rather the brilliant way this was done in South Africa, truth and reconciliation. The triple CO, confession, contrition, compensation. If you do that, you'll get amnesty. 3 C's against 1 A. Brilliant. But publish the names, as they did in South Africa, on South African Broadcasting Corporation, every Friday evening. Publish the names. And the shame and the guilt will be punishment enough. Now, the Triple C institution, very important. You do this, and you will find in the book, if you even would like to acquire it, I'm available if you want to have my signature. And I can only stop by saying that last time I was in Israel, somebody came to me and said, I don't like this 12620, Professor Galtung, but your signature may be worth something in some years. So I'll buy the book.
Okay, that was on the subject of New World Order book. That happens during the conference of New World Order. And this presentation was by Professor Johan Galtung, that was quite a systemic analyst. And you can find this, the proceedings of the whole conference, the whole videos, as 7-hour video on Perdana Global Peace Foundation webpage. If you could zoom in this. Perdana Global Peace Foundation on YouTube. They have their own channel, and this video, as you can see here, is 7 hours long with all the materials of their conference, which are very advisable to watch in the whole. And we were in contact with Perdana Peace Foundation, but they couldn't come on Skype because they are right now doing discussions both in Spain and in Norway. But to my understanding, these videos are good enough, and people don't have to be interrupted with interviews when we have this exquisite material of YouTube videos. We can watch them together, and I'll guide you through to the valuable ones. And that webpage, perdana4peace.org, yeah, that's where you can find their proceedings. The other organization that I want to show is Criminalise Nuclear War Foundation. Criminalise War. Shall we go first to? Perdana were the best, actually, because they really took as the main issue the issue of New World Order. Professor here, he said that there is no New World Order because humans are so active and different, and the moon would be the only place of order. But that is systemically not true, because there is this New World Order. There is this New World Order that has been put into place since Second World War. There, as we talked yesterday to Henning Ditta, we talked about Euratom, and he mentioned that to his understanding, the whole Euratom Treaty was put after Second World War so hastily, just as natural move of globalizers to put on a globalized European New World Order, like New Europe Order. And Euratom Treaty is a treaty that is based to get the resources of uranium that are vital to create nuclear weapons. So the ownership of uranium is monopolized through Euratom Treaty. And Euratom Treaty was signed 5 years on the 9th of May 1950, just 5 years after the finalizing of Second World War. And that's how this new world order is now being put into place by treaties, by laws, universal laws. And talking of which, you can check a webpage called unidroit.org, which is about unification of global laws. And that is an organization that generally prepares the laws, the standards of laws that are later adopted in any country that wants to get loans and credits from the banking system. That is how it functions. It's just very profitable for the elites to get into this system. It's easy, systemic, corrupt system. And even this Unidroit it was sort of established by Mussolini, if I recall, and it is in Italy, in Rome, and as I mentioned this now, then maybe we should watch this video.
Qualcosa di nuovo, anzi di rivoluzionario, sta avvenendo nel mondo e più precisamente nell'Europa occidentale. 6 paesi studiano concretamente la possibilità di unificare i loro patrimoni agricoli, industriali e di manodopera.
So this is how the Euratom started. You can see these countries. The steel and iron corporations that started it and then they started expanding. These are those organizations, the names of which started it. And as they were locked into the financial structures of money makers and usury, then they could expand very vastly and fast with the banking system and crediting available. And now Euratom Treaty has made it safe for them to dispose all the minerals in the whole European Union territory. They belong to these signers of the treaty. They are the people who are householding the bombs.
Qui al castello di Val Duchesse, nei pressi di Bruxelles, sono convenuti i ministri degli esteri dei 6 paesi interessati per discutere queste grosse questioni. Nessuno si nasconde le difficoltà che dovranno essere superate, come complesse sono le singole situazioni che occorre esaminare attentamente per non turbare in modo pericoloso l'equilibrio economico dei vari paesi. Ma è lo spirito realistico, comprensivo, tollerante con il quale tutto ciò viene affrontato che induce a bene sperare. È uno spirito nuovo.
And here we can see how this Euratom Treaty was signed. And the most important thing in that is, actually it's very strange, it wasn't supposed to finish so fast, was it? Maybe. Anyway, the Euratom Treaty was signed first, and in the decisions of Euratom Treaty it said that European Commission had to be created. So the current European Commission that puts on all the directives that are the policies and systemic structures of European Union was created by Euratom Treaty. And I have talked about that yesterday. You can see it in the previous material. But that is how it all comes together. That is how they created this new European order. It's actually something that Hitler just could dream about. And now we have it. It is in place. All the systemic matrices that are put into the law structure. So, and this is the other organization. This is the organization that Chris has talked about, Criminalise War organization, that have actually managed to criminalize through a very, very scrutinized process of court cases and eminent lawyers and judges. They have managed to criminalize the people involved in the Iraq War. George Bush and Tony Blair involved. So please go and have a look at this Criminalise War. They have tribunal. Right now they have had hearings on Palestine. Generally, I have had contact with them already several years ago, and we have been united in our goal to stop this to criminalize the war systems, and together with United States Helen Caldicott Foundation's conference and these conferences and some others, we definitely can become a force that will achieve the goal. And here is another. Here is a very focused presentation of Alex Jones from prisonplanet.com.
Report. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Alex Jones here with an emergency report. I'm going to do a full breakdown on a longer video that we'll post below. But yesterday, on Friday, the Senate gave fast-track authority to President Barack Obama on a secret, giant, global government treaty that covers everything from currency to borders to free speech. The Republican traitors joined with Obama to ram through this illegal monstrosity, this America-killing garbage. And we know from the EU treaties and the NAU treaties what's in this. Part of it's been leaked. Just the part on internet freedom is so draconian, it blows everybody away. This is so incredibly sick. And Mitch McConnell, John Boehner, all of them are enemies of this country. worse than Benedict Arnold ever was. That's why we're in so much trouble. It is over the top insane to see private corporate fascists who've written the secret legislation ramming it through in secret. It is total fascism. It is world corporate government. The good news is people are awake, they're upset, this is a game changer. The bad news is the system doesn't care and is just ramming it through. But the fight is just starting. It's now going to the House. We've got to put pressure on these people. And then again, if they don't pass it, they'll just implement it by executive fiat. Then we'll fight that as well. Look at how Obamacare is so unpopular. It's still there. Look at how this is so unpopular. It's still there. It's because the country's been hijacked. But that is now illustrating it for everyone, and it's the beginning of the end for the New World Order. I'm Alex Jones signing off with this quick breakdown. Be sure and watch the full video below that details it all, and send it to your friends and family, because this is a close battle. This is our country being conquered by foreign institutions, foreign operatives who are tyrannical. Alex Jones signing off for Infowars.com. Share this video and the video below, because we show all the documents, all the news articles, and how known criminals have actually written the secret treaty.
Nåja, det blir Alex Jones. So this was Alex Jones from Infowars and Prison Planet. And I like really this title of the webpage Prison Planet, because these systemic inquisitorial laws, they have created a prison planet, or for many countries a death camp. As in Latvia, we have here something like 1 million people have left the country, the fertile and young people, because there are no jobs, they say, because of the central banking system that is totally corrupt. And as Alex Jones said, the country has been hijacked. Because if we don't control the central banks ourselves, then we don't have a country even. Because in the definition, that's why I work with scientific approach. Because through the definition of what is country, country is something where a group of people who are in the country control their own central banks and money, which we don't do. And by that definition, the country has been hijacked, and it is run by foreign interests for foreign goals, by non-citizens. The citizens don't run it. And in that matter, it is very important to remember what they said just in the beginning, how to define terrorism. Terrorism is killing the defenseless. And here in these systemic inquisitorial structures, the defenseless are being killed by systemic violence. And we will work through how to stop that. And tomorrow we will show how to put a good system on. But now I will elaborate further on the subject of what there have been, how they have been trying to criminalize nuclear weapons. Just weapons, not the whole matrix of systems, but weapons alone. So if we return to Helen Caldicott's conference, then there were 2 presentations on this subject of criminalizing nuclear weapons. One was by Ray Aikson, And here you can see already documents in place. This is done by Women International League for Peace and Freedom. And this is a document of their conference on criminalizing nuclear weapons. And then there was Nuclear Zero presentation. Which is actually very interesting. This is Marshall Islands. We showed them on the map yesterday. They are in the middle of the Pacific Sea, Marshall Islands, between Australia and South America. And on April 24th, the Marshall Islands filed landmarks cases in the International Court of Justice and United States Federal District Court. That is two claims. There is two instances with a claim that 9 nuclear-armed nations have failed to comply with their obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and customary international law to pursue negotiations for the worldwide elimination of nuclear weapons. And they act for the 7 billion of people who live on this planet to end the nuclear weapons threat hanging over all humanity. So Marshall Islands are the only who are doing a huge, huge legal case in this issue. So this is, here is in the courts area that I find very, very nice, well arranged, you see. You can see what they have done. So Marshall Islands have filed 2 instances. International Court of Justice in The Hague and it's Republic of Marshall Islands that is. And here is United States Federal District Court in San Francisco, where they have left in their complaints. And the complaints are to International Court of Justice towards United States, Russia, United Kingdom, France, China, India, Israel, Pakistan and North Korea. And United States again, they have filed separately against. And here down you can see the lawyer team involved. It's very, very impressive, isn't it? So they have really sort of put in, and you can download all the documents here and follow their cases. It's very, very, very impressive material, really. All of this is just mind-dazzling. But as I told you yesterday already, and I will not wear myself out reminding that it's not that simple. Even criminalization of nuclear war is dangerous for stopping colonizing Inquisition matrix, because the forces behind these fabulous positive and very ecologically promising law processes might be the people trying to colonize the whole planet, to be slaved into last prison structures, the last nations that have not been colonized yet and who have these nuclear weapons, to stop these colonizers. That is the dilemma that is so complicated here, and we have to remember that. That is important too. Because if you check out what's going on in Russia and Ukraine situation, then Russia is not an independent state, not at all. Russia's central banking system is in the hands of United States. United States are deciding how much money and investment there's Central Bank of Russia is providing. That's the Republic of Russia documents that were signed after Soviet fell were not documents of independent state, and that's what complicates the whole picture. So nuclear weapons have this state of power where last independent nations are trying to keep their sovereignty. Because what is going on now is that Russians are trying to get back their central bank, to get control over it. And central banking system, Switzerland, BIS.org, Bank of International Settlements and International Monetary Fund, World Bank, you name it, Federal Reserve Banking, they are all, of course, trying not to let Russia to get back their sovereignty. And these nuclear weapons are being played out in this game. So behind these fabulous law proceedings could even be, and most likely are, globalist structures of New World Order. Because Marshall Islands, however suffering, they have suffered so much because of these nuclear bomb tests on their land, but they are being used again. They're being probably used again. But nevertheless, there is this fabulous material to stop nuclear weapons here. And describing further the situation, these are processes of new treaties establishing nuclear weapon-free zones. And we definitely congratulate South America's, because in last 1,000-year history, South America has managed to free themselves recently from the worst structures of neocolonialism, of those World Bank and International Monetary Fund gamesters. And they are really strong and powerful now, and let's hold our hearts